Hello, Earthlings. It's a lovely Wednesday. It's been a few days since my last video, and I had reasons. I don't feel like I need to justify them to all of you, but let's just say I had reasons. So, I've been thinking long and hard about this abortion thing that everybody's arguing about, and the Roe versus Wade thing, and blah, blah, blah. And how everybody freaked out because they thought that with the Roe versus Wade being remanded, pay attention to that word, remanded, to the state courts, the state level, everybody thought that meant that they were reversing the decision. They didn't reverse anything. Okay, I have 20 years actively working in the legal field, and quite a bit of education, and definitely a lot more comprehension than most people would think I have with my level of education. Been through quite a lot, heard things, listened to things, read things, actually went to college about it. We're in that field. And got quite good grades. We're not going to talk about the school closing when I had 4 more classes. We're not going to talk about any of that. What we are going to talk about is my opinions that have developed over the years, both before I had children and after I had children, and after they were all raised, which is pretty much now. They're raised. And I've got my own ideas. So I had heard that, growing up, that abortion and incest were the only 2 times that you should get abortion and incest. Rape and incest. Here I go again with my spoonerisms, tripping over my own words. Anyway, the only times I was taught that it's okay to have an abortion is if with rape or incest. And there was a 3rd time, if the health of the mother is at stake. I mean, genuinely at stake. Like, she's going to die. Because you are not supposed to pick another person's life over yours. Yeah. Unless you want to be a hero of some kind. So, and that's supported by the Bible. Before that, it was called the Tanakh, the Torah. Let's not get technical about how many books are in the Torah. Let's stick with the topic, abortion here, okay? And I agreed with it for the most part growing up. And as I became a teenager and I heard about Roe versus Wade and everything, and I really didn't agree with my parents about whether that was a bad thing or a good thing. They didn't think it was a good thing. The parents I thought were my parents at the time, okay? And I thought that it was really none of their business how a woman feels. If the law says that she can take care of the situation, then she should be allowed to do so. But I didn't feel like getting up in arms. I felt like, from the same perspective that it should be a case-by-case basis, each person should make those decisions within the boundaries of the law. It is not the place of a preacher or a president or a, congressperson, senator, governor, whoever, to make those decisions. Not even the doctor, except to assess medical necessity, right? But if the woman has decided she cannot do it, and she is worried what is coming out on the birthday, right? And she does not feel like burdening somebody else with this, or she doesn't trust that anybody will, and the child will end up in foster care and, the system, maybe be an orphan their whole life, or she does not feel like the rapist that got her that way should be allowed to make those decisions, that he should not be honored as a father. He didn't ask for her permission to involve themselves in that act of procreation. And he probably was only intending dominance anyway, right? So I could understand that. But for people of whatever religion to tell any woman whether she can do it or not, this is not their place. It's between her and God and the unborn child. And then as I got older, there's all this debate came up again. Like, it's come up before, but it came up again and again and again, over and over, about whether the child is even alive. And I took the stance as a mother that the child is alive at conception. And then I found out a few more things about conception. You don't really conceive until between the 10th and the 14th day after the egg is fertilized, right? And that fertilization is not always going to implant in your womb. So what some people don't realize is that several pregnancies, whether the egg is fertilized or not, well, it's not a pregnancy unless it's fertilized, right? But several eggs don't implant, fertilized or not. So you're technically not pregnant. So then I said, well, the morning after pill is not abortion, technically. You're just making the lining of the womb unfriendly to a fertilized egg. You're not aborting a fetus or an embryo. You are simply saying, this was not a good decision that happened last night. I made very foolish choices. This would be not just unfair to me and the father, but unfair to the child. Neither of us is ready, right? So I agree with the morning after pill. The thing that concerns me, though, with any kind of pill is, what if it can make you sterile? There's people that have taken the pill and found themselves sterile after a while. Most people not, but quite a good number of people, it takes them a long time to be able to get pregnant, right? So that's concerning. It's going to alter your body's functionality, right? The birth control pill, the morning after pill, what if it does things to you? What if it causes health problems, right? I know I can't take birth control pills because I have a health concern that is very dangerous. So I have to make some big choices in advance. I have to make sure that if I don't want to end up pregnant, I will not engage in certain activities. That's a choice. So I guess I sponsor choice if you do it preemptively. I don't think it's okay to make these choices after. Okay? Because I remember coming here the last time. I remember the rush. I remember that it was like sliding down a spiral slide after I got called to a certain room in the otherwhere. Unexpectedly, while God had me on a specific task. And I remember the specific task, but not the details. So I was interrupted, I was interrupted in what God had assigned me to do because there was a pregnancy happening and it was my assignment. Okay? And I was female in the otherwhere, and I was female when I was born. So let's just get that out there. Okay? I'm usually female. There's only been one time I wasn't. And I didn't say, oh, I feel like I'm a woman inside. I didn't do that. Because when you're assigned, it's my belief that you are supposed to live that life as that being, of that gender, of that species. That's your assignment for the duration. And you don't get to slap God in the face and say, well, I don't feel like being that today or this time. I don't think you are prohibited from talking to him about it, but He gave you an assignment for a reason. There's something he wants you to learn this time. And I do remember a lot more about that one time than any of these other times. I'm mostly a female when I'm born. Okay? So, anyway, this last time I got called, and you already know if you've seen my other videos what the circumstances were, and they were not the best circumstances. They weren't. There's no way you could say they were the best circumstances, but I wasn't called from a dark place. I was called from a very nice place, right? So that should tell you that babies born of this kind of situation are not bad people. They're not being punished. They have a task to complete. And God set this up, so he has to support the science, right? Unless he absolutely does not want to. But that's the Creator's choice. We're involved in the process, but sometimes he just vetoes everything, like the president. So, anyway, my mother could have made that choice, and she probably would have been having to do a coat hanger, except that, she was from a pretty well-off family in upstate New York, so they probably would have got a doctor to analyze the situation, find it medically necessary, and do a D&C. Right? That's the medical term for an abortion that is sanctioned by a doctor. The doctor has found it necessary. Not all of them were necessary. So all these stories about coat hanger abortions are possibly, I know they happened, but I think they might have been exaggerated in number, because it was a lot more common than you think in the 60s and 70s to get a D and C. That's the letter D, an ampersand, and the letter C. I forget what it stands for, but I learned about this. And my foster mother taught me, because I asked questions and she felt I was old enough to get the answers. So when I found out about abortion later, I said, well, that's a D and C. Why are they doing these back alley abortions when they could go to their doctor? And then I realized not everybody can go to a doctor, but a lot more than you think. And health insurance used to be cheaper, and it was more widely available. So, but they weren't as permissive with teenagers now. See, teenagers were not given birth control pills or condoms or anything. Not until probably the 80s. And they used the justification of protection against STDs and AIDS with the added benefit of not having unwanted pregnancies. But teenagers could not just go get birth control of any kind back in the 60s or the 50s. So that's where that coat hanger thing came in. Nowadays, I laugh at these people holding up these coat hanger signs, because where are you going to find a wire coat hanger? That scenario is not going to happen. Have you seen the hangers that are available for sale at the store? Plastic. Coat hangers are made of plastic now, and they come in all kinds of pretty colors. That is not going to work. I guarantee you, you won't be able to bend that into the right shape without it snapping. It will fail. Then number 2, teenagers nowadays in the new millennium are easily, we're in the 21st century. Teenagers these days in most of the world, and definitely throughout the United States and its territories, they are allowed to go to visit a doctor as a teenager without telling their parents and get contraception. Many times the doctor will justify it, especially in a more religious state, that it's for their menstrual cycle. Of course, it's for their menstrual cycle. Sometimes it is actually necessary for estrogen production. But my point is, we're already permissive with that. Okay, so that's the prevention. You can get condoms in most bathrooms. You can get tampons in most bathrooms. It's a thing. It's a common thing now. They are for sale off the shelf. You don't have to go to the pharmacist and have a doctor's prescription now like you did for quite a while. Right? So the contraception thing isn't a problem. And there are so many teenagers using various types, including the IUD thing under the arm here that they found might actually cause some health problems for some people, based on blood type and your genetics. So, you have to customize your birth control to you. And there's very few of us, 1 in 100,000, that have my blood type and probably shouldn't touch it. And we also can't touch opiates for the same reason. But that aside, that's not everybody. That's 1 in 100,000 people or less. Okay? That's science. That's health science. That's your genetics up against the chemistry of the contraceptives. So I don't see what the problem is there. Then you have the morning after pill. People who are religious should really get over that, because if you take it the morning after, you're not pregnant. If you're drinking the night that you get pregnant, you're not pregnant. It takes between 10 and 14 days for that fetus or that embryo to implant in the womb. If it does, most of the time it doesn't, fertilized or not. And of course, if it's not fertilized, it's not going to implant. It's going to go through the cycle. But you can't be pregnant until that embryo has implanted, has plugged in to your uterine wall, right? Like plugging in a lamp. It's not going to go on. It will not turn on unless you plug it in first. Then you can turn it on. Same thing with pregnancy and a fertilized egg. Most of them do not implant. That's why having a baby is quite a miracle. If you knew the numbers and the odds on that, talk to an OBGYN. They will confirm this. I'm not going to get into those details. These are, again, my opinions based on the life I've lived at over half a century of age, right? So I'm not young, but I'm not old yet. I'm stuck in the middle, right? 50 is the new 30. I'm sticking with that story. Anyway, that's the other thing. And then on top of that, even in states where it is illegal to get an abortion, it is not illegal to get a D and C. A medically sanctioned abortion for medical reasons. And I would conclude that the AMA would probably say that an incestuous pregnancy is a medical reason for an abortion. And they would also probably concede that a rape, a pregnancy caused by a rape, is a reason for an abortion. Right? And there are doctors that would come up with, okay, come on, we are so permissive with our teenagers these days. Do not tell me that you're trapped anymore like you were in the 70s or the 60s or the 50s or the 40s or whatever, okay? It's not the same now. Teenagers can do things now that they couldn't do back then. They can legally buy cigarettes in some states. Yes, they can. And in many countries around the world, they do it all the time while they're 5 and 6 years old. South America, for one, that's not good for little children. They shouldn't be making those kind of choices that can actually ruin their lungs and cause them all kinds of cancers. But hey, I don't live there, right? But this is my opinion on abortion. I think that all this arguing about it is silly, and the reasons for it are silly. And here we go with one thing that I keep hearing repeated and repeated and repeated, for people that want to have late-term abortions. This is the quote: "A child is not, or a fetus is not a child until it takes its first breath." Do you know when a child takes its first breath? Hold on to your seats, boys and girls. At 10 weeks, which is about 2.5 months, that's still within the first trimester, when you're not even showing yet. A fetus is taking its first breaths of amniotic fluid. It has its lungs. And you got all kinds of people arguing this point and that point, and they really get their oxygen from the umbilical cord, blah, 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 blah. Yes, but the lungs are testing out. They are inflating and deflating and taking in amniotic fluid like a fish does with the ocean, and breathing it out again, and breathing it in, and breathing it out. The thing about Abyss, I want to know if that was true. That movie, Abyss, where the aliens have come from elsewhere and they're living under the water to observe safely and not interfere with us. And they save the life of somebody that's deep sea diving, doing geological experimentation of some kind. And something goes wrong and they save his life. And then they make their presence known. And before that happens, there's a scene where some Navy SEALs have gone with them. Oh no, wait, this is one of those vehicles, the deep sea vessels that does the geological stuff under the water. But they use that vehicle for the purposes of rescuing a submarine, right? A Navy sub. And the Marines, or the SEALs, the Navy SEALs come, and they've had this training for deep sea diving. And it's specialized, and it includes synthesized amniotic fluid. And I thought, is that real? Well, guess what, boys and girls? It's real. It is real. It is a real product. It is really used by our SEALs. They've had to use it for certain things, and mostly they've tested out, but there have been some real missions where they've used it. I don't know the details on it, but it has been spoken about in the news, and it is searchable on the internet. And I have screenshotted it in case the mischief makers try and remove it. It includes the URL address. It includes the details. I've screenshotted it. It's on a document in picture form, so it can't disappear. Your fetus will take its first breaths. They might not be for oxygen, but it's to get the lungs working so that when the child is born, the lungs work. Okay? Your child will take its first breaths in your womb, young ladies, at 10 weeks of pregnancy. Your child takes its first breaths, fully completed body, itty bitty fingers and toes about this big. This big. Toenails and fingernails too. Hair starting on the scalp. 10 weeks. Everything's just perfecting. It couldn't make it at 10 weeks if it were born that soon, but it is breathing. The motor skills, the mechanics of the breathing, the lungs inflating and deflating, is happening with that amniotic fluid. The child is breathing. And they have proven that such a fetus at that age, at that stage, can hear under the amniotic fluid and through your belly what is being said. They've put fiber optic cameras up in there by people who are interested in gestation and development in the womb, not people involved in this silly dispute over abortion. People that aren't even thinking about it. For the science have put these little tiny cameras up in there signed a waiver and everything to participate, to see. It's both audio and visual. Tiny fiber optic camera, tiny, kind of like people being so afraid of being seen in the ladies' restroom with these tiny pinhole cameras. Okay, but even smaller mechanics around it. They've inserted it in safely and have observed and have noticed that a child will hear a noise, that the camera with audio can hear the noise, right? So this is on the tape, and the child will hear the noise and turn their head to it, or lean this way with their ear. There's a person in there. So each of you do what you're going to do, but know this. My first 3 pregnancies were not in the best of circumstances, even though I was married, because I had a very, very wicked man for a husband, okay? And he involved people in our marriage in ways that I did not see fit, that I did not agree with, and could be considered criminal, except, again, the government won't help me. Lawyers won't help me. There's evidence to prove what I say, but they won't help me. And it's happened more than once with this person. He's part of the reason I got sold to Epstein when I was 15 in 1982. So don't you sit here and tell me I don't know. And then the 4th pregnancy, do you know what happened with that one? So the first pregnancy was twins, didelphic twins, and medical professionals will love hearing that word, didelphic. Yes, I do. I have a didelphic uterus. Yes, I did have a didelphic pregnancy for my very first pregnancy. So, 4th pregnancy, not 4th child, but 4th pregnancy, was caused by a very physically violent rape in my own living room because I thought my friend, who I had a huge crush on, by the way, was going to drive home drunk and get killed. And he was bigger than me. And I was worried that public opinion, if he died and it got out that I had him at my door drunk like that I wouldn't be legally responsible, but I would be frowned upon and shunned and hated. And if his family found out, they would hate me. And maybe God would hate me, right? And even if nobody did feel that way about me, I would hate me. I would have guilt. So I had him come in and sleep on my big overstuffed sofa. He was pretty tall, ridiculously tall. He has to duck his head to come in a standard doorway in a residence. You know who you are, sir, if you see this. And I was not willing. That wasn't the idea. The idea was not let him drive drunk. But we got talking, and then he decided that talking was more than what we were doing. And he smelled very heavily of cheap 7-Eleven wine. And he had 2 open ones in his hands, and he reeked, which made me wonder how long he'd been out there drinking in his vehicle. And needless to say, I ended up pregnant. And I forgot about it because I was so stressed out and I had to worry about getting 3 other kids to childcare and school and myself to school because I was trying to go back to school, that I didn't pay attention. And I was upset for the first few days, and it was right before my birthday that this happened. Happy birthday to me. And I didn't know about the morning after pill yet for some reason. I don't know, I guess I wasn't in the loop with everybody on that. Found out about it afterwards. And I was very, very upset. Some might say depressed. But I prayed about it. I worked through it. I had a very spiritually powerful experience that night. I heard angels. Okay? I wrote lyrics from that. And I even performed them. Some people will know. They might. They might not. I was living in Virginia. It was 1999. And I definitely ended up pregnant, but I did not know, because once it's not your first pregnancy, you're not as reactive to certain things like morning sickness. So you've gotten tougher, right? Just like the first time you have a cold is like hell, and then second or third time you're like, oh, I've had this before, right? Or headache or anything. Anything you experience the first time is so much more intense, even if it really isn't, because you've never experienced it before. Well, we're talking my fourth pregnancy. So I really didn't notice morning sickness so much. I was frequently running off to work with a cup of coffee and no breakfast because I didn't have time because I was getting everybody else ready. And sometimes I was lucky and had brunch at about 10 o'clock and another cup of coffee. Sometimes it was just a cup of coffee. And then I would eat better when I got home. Half the time I forgot my lunch, or the kids had eaten all the stuff for lunches. I know some of you know what I'm talking about. So I didn't know until midway through my second trimester I was pregnant. And I found out by accident going for a pelvic exam. Just a standard pelvic exam. Because I was kind of worried about some of the symptoms I was starting to notice. And I thought maybe I had uterine cancer or something. It hadn't dawned on me, well, you haven't had your cycle in several months. Didn't occur to me. Because I had skipped cycles before in the past since the third child. And I thought, well, maybe I'm having perimenopause. Maybe I'm going into this change of life early, because it does happen to some women. So I just had put it aside. And then I felt a weird movement on my stomach, like a baby's foot moving. I was like, that's strange. And then this pelvic exam happened, and I definitely felt my uterus was quite full and was touching my stomach below my belly button. And those of you who have been pregnant know what that means. That means you're in your fourth or fifth month. So I did think about abortion. And I didn't realize what date I was at, but I had an idea. And I think back then, Virginia allowed you up till your fourth month, which I really don't think they should have. But when you're in the heat of the moment, you're sweating. I was literally sweating. I was pacing. I couldn't remember how it happened for probably a good couple weeks, because I had gone on with my life and changed my phone number, and I was leaving this person out of my life completely. Did not want him back after that. I'd had an experience with the 911 dispatcher hanging up on me and wanted me to drag myself and my kids after midnight, because remember, I worked swing shift. Well, maybe I didn't tell you that. I worked swing shift, and that's when he showed up at my door when I got home from work around midnight, a little bit after. So this event happened after midnight, which there's people, oh, why'd you let him in? And then you have to tell them the whole story about not wanting him to drive drunk, having just got home from work, blah, 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 which I was willing to do, but get to the hospital, and the sheriff's deputy says right out loud that he thinks I'm just an angry girlfriend and I got dumped. No rape kit done. Nothing. 2 things in a row. And I can't help but think it's because I said his name, and he had friends all over. He was one of those first families ranking people. He had a brother that was a veteran with, Vietnam. Had all kinds of ribbons and decorations on his uniform and blah, blah, blah. So this man was protected from consequences. And keep in mind, I had a big crush on him. I was willing to see how far this relationship would go until that happened. That he would do that when we weren't far enough into the relationship to have made a commitment of any kind. And in my home, with my children sleeping in the next room, because I just brought them home and put them back to bed. I made him wait while I did that. At least he waited till I came back in the living room, right? Their doors were shut. They were back asleep. Because they were sleeping when I get home every time I got off work. They were that young. I didn't want to see him after that. If I can't trust him through something like that, I can't trust him with anything. If I can't trust him in the beginning phases and to keep his act together and be an adult male and control himself, then I can't trust him. And his reasons for getting drunk were really silly. It's because of him not wanting to wait till I got a babysitter and call me last minute. Unless your mama is willing to let you drop your kids off, and mine was not available, at the drop of a hat, or your sister or your best friend, you need a little more time. You need 24 to 48 hours to get a babysitter, and he was unwilling to do that. We had all these great conversations on the phone, and here he is, unwilling to let me have the time to be a good mama and get a reliable babysitter for my children to go out for the weekend for that Friday night or Saturday, whichever one he wanted. Usually he'd call for both and get angry because I didn't have somebody right then, and I wouldn't just leave my kids alone. They weren't old enough yet. Some teenagers, if they're taught properly, safety rules and such, there are certain things they should and should not be doing when they're there alone. One of them is don't answer the phone unless you know it's your mama. Do not let friends in. Right? Do not let any kind of mischief happen. I saw things growing up. I had rules for a reason. My friends making big mistakes, having disasters happen. My safety rules for my kids were because of what I saw. My kids were not going to have those things happen. And they didn't have those things happen. And up until they were the right age, they were not going to be home alone. And even when they were the right age, until one of them was 18 and could take legal responsibility, no outsiders, nobody that doesn't live there, while mom's gone, whether it's to a photo shoot or her job or a date for an hour or two. Believe me, an hour or two. I don't believe in spending the night with a guy when my kids are home alone. I don't believe in getting serious with a guy until he passes through some special hoops, especially after 2 crazy marriages. So this last pregnancy was a rape. And I should have probably got an abortion. But because I didn't realize that I had also been impregnated until I was in my 5th month, there was this time delay. And then, standing outside of Planned Parenthood, I had a big ethical conundrum. And I was glad they were closed that day when I finally got the courage. Closed that day and that time. I think I'd missed them by 30 minutes. I was very relieved, and I went home and I thought about it. And I thought about it, and I thought about it. And for me, I decided, now this won't be the same for everybody, and I'm not saying anybody else should have to make this decision, but for me, I decided it wasn't the baby that raped me. It was the father. And if anybody needed aborting, it was him. You feel me, sir? Yeah, I'm talking to you. You know who you are. He ended up not going to jail, not getting prosecuted, refused to come to court for child support and visitation, and he had said he would bend over backwards to see that that child had everything he needed, and he has done nothing. And that child is now 22. But I am very glad and grateful to God that I made the decision I made, because the youngest child in my family has been the best contributor to things, that we were kind of missing somebody, literally. And he's been a good part of the team. I see my kids and myself as a team in life. We look out for each other. We do things for each other. And I am not saying that anybody else who's been through a similar situation should make the same decision. I am not saying that at all. So don't at me and stop typing. I'm saying for me, that was the decision. What each of you does with that decision, with that situation, is your decision. And I feel strongly that it's your right to have a different choice. Your circumstances might not even be the same, right? Your health might be compromised, especially after having kids already. Your financial situation might be one where you could all end up living in a van down by the river. And that's not good for anybody. The kids that are already there and the mama either. So, you might be well off. And I'm not saying anything about that either. I'm just saying. It's a case-by-case basis. And with it remanded to the states, that's actually constitutionally correct. And yes, you can move. And if you can't move, there are safe ways to take care of it that are totally legal. And I've already gone over this. So I'm going to end the video pretty quick here. And I'm just going to say, this is how I feel about it. And I think that all the fighting and arguing is ridiculous. And it's not compromising women. Women have more choices now. Women have more resources now. It's just a different way of doing things. It is not the 1970s. It is 2022. Moving forward, it's not the same deal that it was back then. Back when it was a very big deal. And thank God for Roe versus Wade. But now, let's thank God that we have better ways to do it. And more ways to deal with it that are completely legal and completely ethical. And let's stop fighting about it and hating each other, because we're a big old family here in the United States. And we're a mixed family. And until recently, other countries haven't had mixed families. They're actually learning from us, whether they'll admit it or not. We are the leaders in that. Forget about all the other stuff, technology, space, whatever. I think this is the biggest thing, is that we're teaching other countries how to operate with a mixed family kind of status. Different religions, different colors, different nationalities, for the genetics, for the background, for your heritage. And still getting along as a nation. Still being able to be one family. We're teaching them that. We don't need to change our government. We don't need to fight against that. We need to fight for better things, for maintaining the Constitution and our Bill of Rights. That's what we need. And I will say this still. It's each woman's decision. There are legal ways to make that decision without ending up in trouble. And there are no more wire coat hangers. I dare you to find one. If you find one, just be proud of yourself. I'm not going to debate it with you here. I'm just saying. If you find one, maybe you ought to sell it on eBay. Make some money. Then you can move to a state where you can get an abortion. I mean, seriously. I bet a wire coat hanger would be worth quite a few bucks on eBay. It's a novelty now. Anyway, love you all. Mwah. Have a good day. God bless.